listening to the Metal Command Podcast.
Welcome back to the Metal Command Podcast. Tony here with you, and today I'm bringing a guest on my show that I think is a really cool dude to be able to talk to, and that would be Giles Lavery of the band Warlord, who's also doing some fill-in gigs for Alcatraz. Giles is not only a singer, but he manages bands, and he also is a contributor to the Metal Voice as well, which is another great podcast out there in the heavy metal world. And it's really nice to get a combination of a guy who's a musician, who's a journalist, and manages bands. It's very rare that you get somebody on that does all three of those things. And while I haven't managed bands technically, I have worked for two pretty prominent heavy metal bands in the past. I'm a journalist, and of course I'm what I would call a semi-retired singer. But it's nice to have somebody that has experienced the scene in every facet you could possibly imagine. So Giles is a great dude. This is a fun interview. The new Warlord album is phenomenal. And without further ado, here's my interview with Giles Lavery, the singer for Warlord. Today on the Metal Command show with Giles Lavery for singing for Warlord, also a contributor to the Metal Voice, and also sang some shows with Alcatraz recently, which is pretty cool. And
we just did of the States.
Yeah. So we have a new Warlord album out called Spirit Soar. I really dig the album, and I'm really happy to have you on to talk about this record.
Thank you.
So let's talk about this album. This Warlord album, I think, is very, very good. And I remember when it was talked about that the album was going to come out, and obviously Bill's no longer with us, there was kind of some pushback on it. But after the first song came out, it seemed a lot of that went away. But I think the album, in my opinion, and you're a music fan just like I am, really kind of is pretty much in line with the quality of the music that Warlord's put out over the years. And talk about the new record and putting this thing together.
Well, it's not so unusual that it sounds like Warlord because we use Bill's music, whether they were fully formed songs such as the two Lordian Guard tunes, or whether they were a fully formed instrumental, or just pieces like a riff or a melody. And there was a lot of that. So it was a case of putting, hey, there's a good riff that would go with that melody, and that would be a good chorus, and that would be a good verse. But however we structured it and however we put it together, it's all his music.
Yeah.
Like musically. I wrote lyrics and vocal melodies, but even the vocal melodies where there was clearly an obvious vocal line demonstrated on guitar or keyboard intended, I stuck to that. So it's not so unusual that it sounds like Warlord because it is Bill's music.
Yeah.
I noticed a bunch of comments about someone saying the chorus to Conquerors sounds very power metal-y. Well, Bill loved power metal, and that was his, he loved Halloween and Gamma Ray and stuff like that, and he wrote that chorus.
Yeah. Yeah, I'll be honest with you. I've followed the band for a long time, and I really, I remember when people were like, it's blasphemy, you shouldn't carry this, you guys shouldn't put this album out. And I was kind of like, nobody's heard any music yet, right? And when I think about that, I think a lot of music fans in general, and you've seen this, where they just kind of want to write something off that just they haven't heard anything yet. And just because there's somebody not in the band that they liked or whatnot, they automatically are going to write it off. And I'll be honest with you, I've never been a fan of that because you haven't heard any music. I mean, nobody knows like what the album's going to sound like. But I think when you put those emails out about, Bill wanting people to continue on with the band, I think that that kind of softened that a little bit. But the first song, when you ended up putting out the first song, I think that went away quite a bit. And, maybe describe the making of this album and, putting it all together and getting everybody together, obviously you had to get another guitar player, and maybe talk a bit about that.
Just if I could backtrack to what you said a second ago, where people, there was some pushback. It's a weird thing. People will talk about, they don't want a certain genre to die or a type of music to die, or there's not enough of something, and, or whatever. Yeah, where are all the good albums these days? And then a band, a legacy band, or a historical band will put out a new record that's very good, and nearly no one will buy it, and they'll want to hear the hits, or it's, people will buy it, but it's so much smaller than what their classic albums, that get celebrated as. Or a band continues without a key member, or with maybe one original, two original guys, or no original guys in the case of like Riot. But they're still a really good band, and they're keeping that music live and played and out there and heard in front of audiences, in front of hundreds or thousands of people, sometimes tens of thousands of people, and they get criticized for that. So what's the alternative? The music doesn't get played, and we all just pack it up and go home, and it just disappears off into the horizon as like, remember that band from way back? It's just such a weird thing. Like the Pantera thing, I love that they're out. And I'm not even the biggest Pantera fan, but I really dug what they did.
Right.
And it's great that they're out there, because now there's Pantera music being played in front of tens of thousands of people, and that's awesome. And people are happy to hear it. You go there and you're happy. Like, what else in the world? I mean, are we gonna, you turn on the TV, it's like the news, it's horrible. You go out into society, and it's there's a lot of tension out there right now. There's a lot of political stuff going on. So music makes you happy. You go to a concert, you feel good. So let's take that away as well. Let's just start criticizing every band that's out there that doesn't have like the original like four guys or something. To me, it sounds kind of stupid to do that. It seems stupid to do that. As far as how we put this together, I mean, Bill did encourage. I mean, I was very close to Bill in the last 5-6 years before he died, particularly the last 3. We talked about doing something again. We talked about doing, me being involved with Warlord again. We talked about a lot of things. One thing we did talk about is that he didn't want to tour or play live anymore. He just didn't, he didn't see that as a big deal at all. He goes, well, I'm the composer. He goes, songwriters don't always tour, and I'm far more comfortable sitting at home writing songs than I am sitting in a splitter van for 9 hours driving to the next gig, or sitting at an airport or flying for 15 hours. That was always something that's the side of it he didn't particularly like. And he also felt like gone were the days where Warlord ever had a chance of being like Kiss. He had big dreams. He wanted Warlord to be like a Kiss sort of production, because he loved, as a teenager, he loved Kiss, and that was one of the first shows he ever saw, and he was hugely impressed by that. So I know I'm going off on a bit of a tangent here, but people don't know the conversations that were had between me and Bill, and subsequently with Mark. That's why we shared just a couple of emails. I've got hundreds of emails, hundreds. Now, when Bill died, the furthest thing from our mind was to put Warlord back together. It just seemed like, man, we've just lost Bill. It just really, didn't feel right. And when he was sick, he was also saying, continue this thing, make it big, and don't call it something else. Don't call it, Lucifer's Child of the Damned or whatever. Don't bastardize it. Keep it Warlord. Why quit now after everything that's been fought for? So we needed to find the right guitar player. I mean, after a couple of years after Bill died, we started thinking like, yeah, okay. I mean, Mark really got an urge to play these songs again. I love singing them. We went through these demos that Bill had left us, and it just slowly started coming together. Like, maybe we can do live shows. Maybe there's an album here. Maybe this thing can be brought to life again. We went through a couple of guitar players that were interested, but no one quite nailed it like Eric. I mean, you don't want some guy. A lot of guitar players do this, and I understand why, but they want to put their own stamp on what they're doing. And I totally get that. And they don't always understand the band they're joining. And I've seen that with other players as well. They come in and they kind of want to just go, cool, we'll use the name and we'll call the band that, but now the band sounds totally different.
Yeah.
Eric came in and he kept it very, 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 if not exactly, close to what Bill did when replicating Bill's guitar parts. We did use some of Bill's guitar tracks on the album, although it is fairly sporadic because we could only pull certain parts off the demos using AI, but not AI as far as like what you think. I mean, like you could isolate the guitar track now, whereas previously with older technology, you couldn't. You would have had the bass and the vocals and
Right.
keyboard, whatever. There were no vocals, but you know what I mean, mixed in. We could use AI to get a clean guitar track that could be then put into the new mix. It's not an AI record by any stretch of the imagination. So we were able to utilize some of his guitar tracks, but Eric stuck so close to the demos. He understood the Greek musical influence of Bill's writing. And he didn't make it all about him. He made it all about Warlord, and that's what worked. And that's why live it's going to sound like Warlord. The album sounds like Warlord, and I mean the tricky part really came down to there were no lyrics. There was a couple of sheets of lyrics but they were very just cut lines and ideas, and we did utilize some of them.
Yeah.
But for the most part, there was no lyrics, so I had to write lyrics. And Bill's a very unique lyricist, so whatever I wrote had to work within what I had to ask myself: what would Bill do here, or what wouldn't Bill do here? Was probably more the point. It really had to be in keeping with Warlord, much the same as the guitar playing was. So I'd like to think, while I'm far from the lyricist Bill was, I'd like to think that the lyrics I wrote were respectful to the Warlord legacy.
Sure.
And and other than that, it was like piecing together just a ton of riffs and melodies and ideas that Bill had. Some of them weren't even played on guitar. They were there was cassettes and cassettes and cassettes of like keyboard, song ideas that were just him on keyboard that we then transposed to guitar and that Eric played. So there was a lot went into this, a hell of a lot went into it.
How has the response been as far as people that have heard the album? I mean, what's the reaction been? I haven't seen a lot myself, but I really like the record, to be honest with you.
Surprise. I mean, and thank you. But surprised. Wow, and it really sounds like Warlord. That's been the response. Wow. Yeah, because we weren't going to put out like, Warlord does Cold Lake,
Yeah.
And like, Talk Dirty to Me Part 2 or whatever. I mean, and it wasn't going to be like, all of a sudden sounding like Manowar, or nothing wrong with them, but you know what I mean? It had to sound like Warlord. So there's no that's probably the main response. People that have actually heard it have gone, damn, wow, it sounds totally like Warlord. And that's been cool. I mean, that's kind of been like, okay, mission accomplished, because it would have been horrible if people heard it going, yeah, I can see what you're trying to do there, but it sort of sounds like Dokken, that would have been, that wouldn't have been, I wouldn't be feeling so good now,
Yeah, I agree. So I'll be honest with you, from the very first song on the album, it just reminded me of Warlord. Like I didn't have any, I go into everything with a blank slate. Like, what is it going to sound like? Am I going to like it? And even if it didn't sound like Warlord, is the music at least good? Right. That's kind of how I look at things. But it's definitely Warlord. There really is no, other way to really put it as far as how the album sounds. I think if anybody, at least in my opinion, if you've liked the band's back catalog, you'll like the record. I mean, that's probably the best way of putting it. And, you know, the very first song, Pale Horse, I mean, it's totally it's totally Warlord. I mean, when people actually hear that, they're gonna, anybody that's a doubter, in my opinion, I think is going to like the record. I haven't really officially reviewed it yet, but I definitely think the record's great. And I really compliment you guys for not only making a good record, but actually keeping, kind of in tune with what the band had done before. I think a lot of the doubters, you're not going to have many of those. I haven't seen a lot of those since the first song came out. So
it's interesting because there was, certain parts of the world where the band is quite popular.
Mhm.
There was some, there was howls of protest. We can't, but that's sort of dulled down now as well. But we can't worry about that. We don't
Sure
make music to by committee. It really send out questionnaires. Should we do this? Should we do that? That's just ridiculous. No band would do that. Again, we'll see. We got literally like 2 weeks, I think, till the record's out.
Yeah.
2 songs are out there in circulation right now. The Watchman's on the B side of the 7-inch single, and so yeah, we'll see. We'll certainly see what people think, but I hope they like it.
High Roller Records, the label that the album is coming out on. I don't think as many people in the States kind of understand this, but I think that label has always done very high quality stuff as far as anything they have put out, any of the reissues. I have a reissue of the first album from them, and they do phenomenal work. They really do. And what made you guys go with them for this record?
Let me change position here. Sorry, I've got the worst back pain ever sometimes. Okay. High Roller did the back catalog like back in 2016. Other labels taking a stab at the back catalog, and nothing against those labels, but it came from a conversation with me and Bill. He goes, "Don't let my music die." He said that numerous times at numerous different stages of as we went along, including continue the band without me, play these songs live. But when it came to a conversation about the back catalog, he wanted it to be on a label that was going to put these records out the way he always envisioned them, which was basically like Kiss Alive 2, with booklets and everything, and obviously, and this, it would have to have been retrospectively, because in 2016 most of the catalog was already out, not all of it. I knew of High Roller. A friend of mine here in Germany said, "Man, they'd probably be interested in the Warlord catalog." They made a very, very good offer, and which was hard to ignore. But it wasn't necessarily the offer; it was what they wanted to do with the catalog.
Yeah.
And Bill gave me basically the vault, which was, dozens of cassettes of songs, versions of songs, and certainly unreleased songs that no one had ever heard. And it took me about 6 months to, it took me about 2 weeks to transfer them all, and then about 6 months to just go through everything. And in between me and the label, it worked out like, okay, there's at least 1 CD worth of bonus tracks per album here, at least, if not more. And we left no stone unturned. The only demo we couldn't find was the demo from '85 for the song "My Kingdom Come," which was re-recorded on the Holy Empire album. That demo still remains missing, but everything else is there. Everything else that Bill remembers, and we even put stuff out that Bill had forgotten about. And we did deluxe editions of "Deliver Us," "Cannons," "Rising Out of the Ashes," Holy Empire, and the Live in Athens. More recently, The Hunt for Damien, re-recordings with Nick, and that was great to put them together because they are the definitive editions of these albums. They really are. And so when it came time to have a conversation about this new album, there was talk of like, okay, do we go to Atomic Fire? Do we try and go back to Metal Blade? Because Metal Blade have obviously done the A through C record and done a very good job on that.
Mm-hmm.
Do we, try and do that thing that a lot of, like the bands like Accept are kind of found a home on now, Napalm, But then we kind of thought, you know what, let's just stick to the people that have done right by us for the last 4 or 5 years. We also did the Lordian Guard records reissued on High Roller, along with some of Bill's solo material. And they were interested and very excited about a new Warlord album. And I said, okay. And I proposed how we were going to do this. And again, they made an offer that made it possible to do this. And again, they haven't let us down. The packaging is amazing. Everything's amazing. I can't fault them at all. It really just feels like why not High Roller at this point would be more the question rather than why High Roller.
Yeah, I would probably say I first heard of them when they did all the Jag Panzer reissues. I'd never heard of the label before. And I remember they did a box set for the first few albums that was on vinyl. I ended up ordering it. They shipped it over here from Europe, and it was, I can't even begin to express how well done the stuff they have put out actually is. And even the reissues I have of the first couple Warlord albums are just like, the quality factor of what they put into it, I thought was very, very good. And so I think it's great that you went with them because you get the whole catalog on one label. You're not like jumping from, you can keep track of everything there. Essentially. Yeah. Makes it easier.
Oh yeah, it makes it's great. Everything under one roof. They understand the band. They understand what we want to do. They understand, it's not like you're having this tug of war with the label all the time.
Mm-hmm.
No, it's really good. We're very happy, and we'll probably, if there's another record, we will probably go with them as well. Why not?
Yeah,
unless they want to.
Yeah. Speaking of that, so. Have you thought about it? And I know this is probably, you probably have shows coming up, I'm going to guess. But now that you've put this album out, have you thought about it? Has anyone asked you, and I don't know if they have, of even after this album comes out, of making another record in the future? Or is this maybe going to be it and you just keep playing live and playing the songs?
I think it will really depend on how well this is received. If the record does well and people like what we did, there's no reason not to do it. Now, there's at least one more. There's still some Bill stuff, and I don't want to get to a point where we're scratching the bottom of the barrel. There has to be kind of decent amount of material to draw from. Again, and I don't know. It's again something me and Mark would have to talk about. How we would go about doing it, what it would be. It's a few people have even asked, would you write some songs in the Warlord style? And I'm kind of, I'm really kind of 50-50 on that to a degree because Bill's music was a big part. I still like to have his spirit on any Warlord record is important to me. I'm not saying if someone wrote a song that was like, damn, this is like, without being a complete copy, this is like in that vein of the Deliver Us album, and it'll be like, wow, okay. Again, we're all just talking very, very, very hypothetically here. So, before everyone starts getting out the pitchforks and burning torches yet again. So, who knows? It really depends. It depends on what the future holds, really.
Well, it's not something that's out of the question. I ask that because, and the reason I say that is that I think, like I said, I think the record is very good. I think most people are going to like it. I think a lot of the doubters are going to like it. Obviously you're always going to have those people that are, no matter what you do, they're going to say it's not Warlord or whatever, but
tribute band or whatever.
Yeah, that kind of thing. But I think, and I'll just give you my personal observation. I think the way this record came out, I really think you should do another one. So that's just me. I'm just going by the vibe and the feel I get from this album. And the one thing that I get from, obviously Mark is still there. Mark is, from what I know of him, I've had him on my show a couple times. He's not someone that's going to do something half-assed, as we say here, right? And I think that ultimately, if Mark is going to put something out, you mentioned the A to Z album, it's going to be pretty damn good. I mean, that's just how I view him.
I mean, with a lot of bands, when you say, well, who's the original guy? And you go, well, they've still got the original drummer. A lot of people kind of think of, I don't know, like the Guess Who or something, where it's like the least musically contributing member of the band, and it's almost like having no originals because it's just the drummer. Mark's not that drummer. If you take any Warlord song and you were to put another drummer on those tracks, it doesn't sound like Warlord. I mean, Lordy and Guard didn't sound like Warlord. But you put Mark's drums on those tracks and all of a sudden it does. Mark's a very musically involved drummer, and his style of drumming, it's almost like Neil Peart with Rush. It's a intrinsic part of the music. It's not just a drummer and you could put another drummer in his place and it would be more or less the same, like a lot of bands do, change drummers. Like Accept, they can change drummer 4 more times, it'll still sound like Accept, because that's not where the sound of Accept is coming from. But the sound of Warlord was Bill and Mark. And Mark is a huge part of the Warlord sound. So in our case, it's very much different,
Yeah. It's kind of like, I'll give people an example. When Dave Lombardo wasn't in Slayer anymore, they sounded a lot different, right? I mean, he just had an own distinct style. So it's probably the best analogy I could give as far as, when it comes, because some drummers, you get them out of the band, the sound is a lot different. And I think that's kind of the same kind of thing you're describing. If you were to put someone in the band aside from Mark, because Mark does have a pretty interesting style of playing. And, even with like him in Fate's Warning, I mean, I think Fate's Warning sounded better when he joined the band. That's my opinion. But
wow. Yeah, I mean, no disrespect to anyone. I mean, I'm, whatever disclaimer I should put there, but wow. I mean, when Mark joined Fate's Warning, to me, that's my Fate's Warning.
Yeah.
Parallels, perfect symmetry, inside out. Man, that's my Fate's Warning right there.
Yeah. Pleasant shade of gray.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah. And so I totally get where you're coming from on that. But again, do you have some shows planned? Obviously, I believe I've seen some stuff online of booking some stuff.
Yep. And we have a warm-up show in Gladbeck, Germany, which is right near Essen, and that's a warm-up show for the run that we're about to do. That's on the 22nd of August. 23rd of August, we have the Trudheim Festival. We're working on some shows just after that before we go to Greece, which is where we're going to be playing the Golden R Festival. And then in September, we're coming back over to Europe, and we're doing Pyrenean Warriors Festival, and then we have another festival the very next day, which hasn't been announced yet, so I don't want to say what it is.
No.
Actually hassling them, saying when can we announce it? And then we got some other stuff that we can't announce yet as well, but there is plenty of live stuff coming up and going on. So
sure,
that's great. Probably when all's said and done, we will have done more shows in the next 12 months than Warlord's ever done in the career. So that's kind of interesting. It reminds me a little bit of my great friends in Riot.
Yeah.
Sadly, because of Mark Reale's health, they were never able to kind of get out and really like tour, at least from the sort of 90s onward era. Now, Riot's played more shows, in the last 10 years than Riot had played in like 30 years, So it's kind of cool. So we're looking forward to. I mean, if people want it, we'll keep playing.
Yeah,
we're not going to go. We're only going to do 6 shows. That's it. If people only want 6 shows, then we'll do 6 shows. But if people want 60, then we'll do 60. It all depends on if the demand is there. We're here as well to hopefully fulfill it and hopefully exceed people's expectations.
Right. Well, speaking of live shows, I'm going to go to a different topic. You were singing with Alcatraz live. You did some tour dates with them.
Yeah, we did 13 shows at the American tour. Yeah.
Yeah. And sadly, I missed it. I had an obligation I couldn't get out of. But how did those go? And what was it like singing those songs live for you? Because
incredible. I mean, the history of Alcatraz has been a spotty one, and there's this big misconception of Alcatraz. Huge misconception is that it was Graham Bonnet's band.
Mm-hmm.
It was never, ever anything other than the fact that he was the singer. I mean, he wrote lyrics and he wrote vocal melodies, absolutely. The musical direction has always been driven by whoever was the guitar player at the time. That's why the first 3 albums sound totally different.
Yeah.
Jimmy Waldo has always, and anyone, I mean, Steve Vai even said this very, very recently to us. He said it was always Jimmy Waldo that was always the guy we looked to for all the decision making. I mean, Jimmy booked the rehearsals. Jimmy was booking the live shows back in the 80s. This is all back in the 80s. Yeah. Jimmy taught him how to drive. It was, Jimmy's the one that brought Steve Vai into the band. Jimmy Waldo has always been the Tony Iommi of Alcatraz, the driving force. And a lot of people it was this big misconception that it was like Graham's more or less a solo project of Graham's, and it wasn't. So there's been a lot of players in and out of that band over the years. And there's been a lot of controversy and there's been a lot of whatever. But Jimmy's been the thread that's gone from, beginning till now, along with Gary. Doogie came to, as you know, I've been working with Alcatraz for many years in a management, songwriting, producing capacity. And I never had this big thing. I'm like, well, I'm going to sing. When Doogie came to us recently and said, look, I do want to go back to doing my solo thing at some point, and we're getting more and more offers. He was getting offers, and then it was becoming this sort of thing like, well, you've got a booking on that weekend. That's the same weekend as we've got this thing, And in the end, he sort of put his hand up and said, look, I came in when Graham left to help out with some live stuff. One thing led to another. We made 2 great albums, but it is time for me to go back to being a solo artist. And we respected that. We sort of always knew it was coming, because Doogie has had a very transient sort of, he's moved around to many different amazing things, Ingve and Shankar. Obviously, Rainbow was the first of those things. And he'll do more great things. And then it was a little bit like, okay, what do we do? Do we go try and call up Tony Harnell and see if he's interested? Or someone like that, for them to do one album and then decide they want to go back to doing what they're doing as well. And, Joe and Jimmy said to me, well, man, you always sing at soundcheck. You always get up and sing at soundcheck. And you sing these songs really, really good. And I said, oh, well, thank you. They said, well, what do you think about just coming in here? I mean, at least for the US tour, we're going to, and the rest of the dates for 2024. And I said, all right, well, that's interesting. So we had a couple of rehearsals, and boy, it just felt good. I mean, those songs are real comfortable for me to sing. There's a lot of video on YouTube. There's actually more video of the recent tour on YouTube than any other Alcatraz tour recently that I can find. So that means we might be doing something right. And the response has been absolutely phenomenal on the tour. I just couldn't believe it. People are just like, I get off stage, I go over to the merch table, and I'm just to say hi to anyone who may have come to the show that I know, and it was just crowds of people just like, man, whoa, holy shit, And I'm like, wow, okay, thank you, So it's been an incredible response singing for Alcatraz, and yeah, I mean, we're kind of making plans now, so we'll see where that goes, and we're definitely going to do another US leg. We've got Varken coming up. We've got a Swedish festival the day after Varken. We've got a bunch of other. We're getting more and more bookings coming in all the time, So, yeah, I mean, we're making plans. So we'll see.
Yeah, I saw the videos. I thought you did a great job on those songs. It was, and the thing is, yeah, you're right. A lot of people have been in and out of the band, but I thought live everything looked great and the vibe was really, really good. Maybe you should just stick around and sing for him, you know?
The New York video was someone did some really good filming of New York, was really cool. But yeah, I mean, and this is Alcatraz. This is not the old band, you know. This is a continuation of the band that reformed in 2019 with Joe Stump as a guitar player, with Jimmy Waldo, you know, with Gary J. And you know, Gary doesn't tour anymore really, but he's working on some stuff for the next record right now. But with Jimmy and Joe Stump, it's the Alcatraz that is continuing from the Alcatraz that reformed in 2019.
Yeah, I got
you. That's what this is, and you know, hopefully delivering the songs the way people remember them, and writing some pretty good new ones as well. That's kind of the plan.
That's awesome. You know, and I'm not as familiar with the history of Warlord as maybe you might be, but have you decided maybe to play any shows over here in the States?
Yeah, I mean, we are trying to do that as far as next year. We've got one offer for a festival, and we're going to try and put some dates around that. That's the plan. Yeah.
Yeah, because I think that would be really cool to see that, to see those songs played live, because I've never seen that, obviously. And you know, I've followed the band loosely over the years, but I know touring in the States can be difficult financially and logistically in many ways. So,
very much so.
Yeah, and that's the thing, man. You manage bands, you deal with this all the time, and I think what people don't understand is, like, in the U.S., you have like 4 major media hubs, right? You got Chicago, New York, you know, Los Angeles. You know, you have these major cities, and they're separated. So it's almost like you almost have to do like a minimum of 20 shows in between these cities because the country is so big, you know, and it makes it difficult.
That's when you get into, you know, and I'll do it. I'm not too proud at all. And I'm honored that 20 people show up, and that's great. But financially, it's really hard when you know, to fill in the gap between, you know, as you say, these bigger cities that you mentioned. You've got to have like shows in between just to get you there. You can't drive 15 hours, you know.
Yeah.
But then you wind up playing in front of 80 people because, you know, you're playing in markets that are secondary or third tier markets. And then you can only make so much money playing to 80 people.
Yeah.
I mean, the venues, the promoters are going to say, okay, well, you know, you guys are good for maybe 80, 100 people. I can give you X amount of dollars, and which is totally understandable and fine. But it doesn't really keep 6 or 7 or 8 guys, if you bring your crew out on the road, fed and accommodated, and gas and vehicle hire, and you know, I mean, I like I said, I'll play in front of 11 people. I don't mind. You know, that's fine with me if they're into it and they're there. But again, it's just, you got to crunch the numbers at some point, and that's when it gets hard, because you're like, okay, well, the big cities can give us like the bigger fees, but then we got like a week of like lower fees. What do we do? Or you do get into that situation where sometimes 80 people, well, we've sold 26 tickets. I mean, this hasn't happened yet, but I'm just sort of speculating. And then they want to kind of pull the show. So then then you're not playing, you know? So it can be tough. I mean, because again, traditional metal audience in America is nothing even a fraction close to what it once was. And when you get outside those main centers, you just, you know, you can dry up real quick, because the audience, there is an audience there, but it's such a big country. It's spread so thin across the country that to try and catch all those people, it's very, very hard. Whereas Europe, I can be in Holland in 45 minutes, and I'm in Germany right now, you know. And it's just a lot more of it's just more interest in this type of music over here, unfortunately.
Yeah, and not only that, but
fortunately for Europe, but I mean, unfortunately for America, it's more of a European thing. You know what I mean?
Yeah. What ends up happening here is most bands from Europe, unfortunately, what they have to do is play some of these bigger areas, maybe play a couple of smaller areas, and rely on people traveling across 1 or 2 states to go see them, which happens quite a bit. But you have to rely on that. And what makes it tough and what makes it very difficult for bands here is that, or bands when they come here, is that after the whole pandemic thing happened, everybody just stormed out of the gate, went on tour all at once. And when you have like 20 shows in like a week and you only have so much money, or in some cases time to be able to go to them, most of the time what ends up happening is you don't really get the pre-sales that people used to get. Like, you would get shows that would have a pre-sale of, oh my God, the show's almost sold out in like 2 days, right? And it didn't matter who it was. Let's say they're playing a small venue. Let's say Primal Fear is playing a venue that maybe holds 500 people. And they would announce that, and that show would be almost sold out. And now it's like, okay, a band like that may only sell 100 tickets pre-sale. And then you don't know if you're going to get a walk-up. A lot of them will get a walk-up because then people will say, okay, I have money now, or I really am not going to go to this show I was going to go to next week. And then suddenly they show up. But it's in this day and age, it's very uncertain in some respects. And some promoters, I can understand if you're putting money up and get a little weary of that.
Well, it's it's funny you say that, because it is. People are so weary it's this self-fulfilling prophecy. What am I trying to say? I mean, people are holding out buying their tickets in case the band's cancelled. And the reason bands are canceling is because ticket sales are light and the promoter pulls the show.
Yep.
So it's like chicken and egg. I ain't going to buy my tickets until closer to the time, because the last 3 bands I wanted to see pulled the show.
Mm-hmm.
And the promoter doesn't see at least like a third of ticket sales, they're going to go, man, I'm just going to cancel. I'll give you guys, if you're lucky, you'll get your cancellation deposit, and that sucks. Or you have to cut a new deal to come, and then now your budget's out the window. It can be tough. I mean, please, people, buy the tickets. I mean, you'll get a refund if the show gets canceled. It's not like, again, I don't want to sound like an asshole, but someone hanging on to your $30 for a few months, it's not, it's not going to kill anyone. I what I did during pandemic, or as things were coming back, I would even buy tickets for shows that were like overseas. I wasn't even going to go. I just bought a ticket just to support the bands and the shows,
Yeah.
I just, when certain places started opening up again, if I dug a band, I just, I didn't do it for Iron Maiden, but I did it for like smaller bands. I'll buy 2 or 3 tickets just to help them out, Just because if you don't do things like that, you can't just take and take and take and take and take,
Yeah.
If you're into this music, I like to give something back,
Yeah, it seems now, I don't know, maybe in Europe it doesn't seem as bad with that, but I know here.
That can be. No, Europe is. No, this is happening over here too. It's a lot of stuff got cancelled for a lot of years there, and still is. And especially like bigger profile bands canceling, that hits a bigger pool of people. So you got a bigger pool of people that are kind of spooked,
Yeah.
You're wearing a T-shirt of a band that canceled 2 times in a row,
Yeah, I remember. Yeah, they did. They canceled the whole.
Legitimate reasons, But I'm just saying that doesn't help. People get spooked.
Yeah, I totally understand and get that. What for you? You're managing bands. You've been involved in the industry for a while. Right now, what is probably the biggest challenge a lot of bands are facing today? Like in your eyes, like if you had to take and think, there's one thing that's really, really difficult, more difficult than anything out there for them right now. Like what would you say that is?
Their own expectations. And again, if I'm putting on my industry hat now rather than my singer hat, their own expectations. Every band thinks they're bigger than they are. Every cult level band, for the most part, the ones I meet, everyone thinks they should be playing more than they are. And that's great because they want to. That's awesome. They want to pound the pavement, get out there and play. But and I don't want to be taken the wrong way here, but you know what it's like. Everyone wants to be the exception. It's tough out there, but we want to be the exception because we're awesome, and that's a great way to think. But it is. I've just found, for me personally, having your own expectations, be ambitious, but be a realist as well, and having your own expectations in check.
Yeah.
Because you can't always be out there playing. You can't tour a market, then 6 months later come back, tour it again, and expect the places to be full. It's just not, how often do you go see your favorite band? Like once a year, once every 2 years? I mean, even once a year, people go, I just saw them, And we're talking about cult level. I mean, the big bands don't have this problem as such, but it's managing expectations. I mean, as a manager, that's actually also very hard, because again, most bands want to play everywhere all the time, and it just, it's the law of ever decreasing returns for the most part. Because if you come back and hit a market again way too soon, then it's going to be like half the people that were there the last time, because they only, in their minds, they just saw you,
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think that is probably an adjustment that a lot of players have had to make a little bit, and it's been a little bit more compounded post-COVID, because there's just been this glut. This glut of traffic jam, of like just trying to get like all the postponed tours. That sort of backed us up into like 2023. And then while that was happening, everyone else wanting to kind of pile on and say, well, it's like owing a debt. It's like owing someone money. It's like the electric bill or something like that. You owe them money from like the past if you haven't paid the bill, but then you still got to keep paying them for your ongoing service. So It's a little bit like that, to use a really bizarre metaphor, but it is. It's like there's the yearly, churn of bands that are out there anyway, but then there was this big backlog that kind of got dumped on top of it as well.
Yeah.
I hope I'm making sense, No,
I totally get it. Well, I'll be honest with you, Giles. It was great to have you on the show.
That's great to be here, man. Good to talk metal always, and
with someone like. Always talking metal, and I really, like I said, I really dig this Warlord album. I'm going to be honest with you, and I will tell Mark this when I talk to him later, that I think the album's great. I think you really hit something on the head, the way that it should have been, and it's everything about the album, the vibe, everything about the songs, everything's right, and. I really hope, watching the Alcatraz videos, I think it would be pretty cool to hear you do an album with them. That's just my personal preference.
It's been kicked around, so we'll see what the future holds.
All right, man. Well, hey, thanks for coming on again. On here with Giles Lavery, obviously singing for Warlord, also a contributor to the Metal Voice, and at least as of now, currently singing with Alcatraz. So,
cool.
Hey, it was great to have you on, my dude. And thanks for your time. Seriously.
Thank you.